Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Richard, thank you for those wonderful remarks. An amazing story of service right here in this library, and congratulations on winning the well-deserved award. And also thanks to all the volunteers and friends who've helped make this possible, and the dignitaries and leaders of service organizations as well. It's tremendously fitting that we're here in a building named after Dr. King. In his famous drum major speech, Dr. King called on us to have a new definition of greatness. And he said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. He went on to say, you don't need to have a college degree. You don't have to have your subject and verb agree. You just need a heart full of grace and a soul motivated by love. That's what we're here about. That's the spirit of service. As we gather today, Americans from all walks of life in the Southeast are demonstrating that greatness. There are neighbors, helping complete strangers. There are police and firefighters and Red Cross volunteers and AmeriCorps and the National Guard and FEMA and the Coast Guard, and the list goes on and on and on. People giving of themselves to help others in a spirit of kindness and generosity. And every day, beyond the disasters, we see that same spirit manifested in so many ways. Service organizations like Rotary, Lions, Boys and Girls Clubs, FFA, 4-H, all of you who are here and so many who are watching online and are part of service itself. That spirit of service is fundamental to who we are. And I could go on literally all day listing service organizations. If I left you out, forgive me. I honor each and every one of the organizations, especially those who have joined us today, but who are doing work elsewhere as well. But as we honor that service, we unfortunately have to also acknowledge that these are difficult times in our country. We're divided, we're angry, and on a host of measures which are very, very troubling, we're seeing a decline in the spirit of service. We're seeing that decline in, for example, the U.S. military last year fell 40,000 recruits short of its goals. AmeriCorps and Peace Corps also struggled to meet their goals. Things are looking up a little bit this year, but it's still a challenge. Many communities have trouble filling their especially volunteer firefighters are getting scarce, and wildland firefighters are exhausted. Police departments are having trouble recruiting. Many of you know in the nonprofit and service sphere that finding volunteers, finding employees, raising funding is getting harder. The percentage of families giving to charity has gone down. And trust in service organizations, trust in government are at troubling low levels. And among our nation's youth, there is a pervasive sense of despair, of helplessness, and hopelessness, and to such an extent in our society that the Surgeon General of the United States of America issued a report on the epidemic of loneliness and isolation, which for some of our fellow citizens is a life-threatening condition. So we've got some work to do. And if we ask ourselves the question, as we all know, service benefits not only the people who are served, but the people who serve. There's lots of studies about how people who serve have better attitudes about the world. They feel more connected with people. Their health is better. Their emotional mood is better. And we know the importance of service to our society, but we have to then ask this question. If service is so fundamental to our democracy, so fundamental to our national character, so essential to our daily lives, why is there no place, physical place, anywhere in the United States of America, no physical place to honor and inspire that spirit of service? We have no National Museum of Service yet. We'll fix that. We don't have museums or exhibitions in most public libraries and most local, state, and historical museums, but we're going to fix that as well. And we can do that. We're going to talk about today how to do that. And why is it that in every high school and junior high in the United States of America that I've ever been to, and I swear I've been to many hundreds, every one of them has a display case honoring athletic achievements, every single one. And every college of the 5,000 plus colleges and universities, it's all about athletic achievements, taking nothing away from the commitment and the joy of sport. But why are there no exhibits of service in our high schools, in our junior highs and our elementary schools. We're going to hear from some people today who are making that happen, and we're going to share with you how you can make it happen. Because here's the thing. As Dr. King said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. Not everybody has the physical ability to be in those trophy cases of athletics. But every child, every young person, every adult, every senior citizen from all walks of life, all backgrounds, has the ability to serve. And we're here today to talk about how to honor that. Today, with this initiative, we're launching a bold plan to create literally tens of thousands of service exhibitions all across the country. And when we have achieved that, and those will be in public places where people already go, places like libraries, places like schools, community centers, existing service museums, where people already go. You think about it, if you leave here, if you're like us, everywhere you go, you'll say, you could have a service exhibit here. You could have it in the airport terminals. You could have it at the shopping malls. You can put it at your farmer's market. Because if you make exhibits like this, as we're going to see throughout the day, they can be affordable, transportable, inspiring, inclusive, and you can make them relatively quickly and in time for the nation's 250th celebration of the Declaration of Independence. We're going to talk about how to do that. And I know this is audacious. I know this is an audacious goal, but I also know it is urgently and desperately needed. Our society needs to heal. We need to unify. We need to be inspired. And I know of nothing else better than service that does that. When we serve together, we learn to respect differences and transcend divisions for the greater good. Some years ago in my district, on election day, we had a terrible flood. And I was trained as a whitewater kayaker, so I went out in a rescue boat in this flood-swollen river. It was kind of dangerous, actually. We pulled up to this one house, and I jumped out of the boat. I had a wetsuit, helmet, tactical life vest. I did not ask the person who they were going to vote for that day. I didn't ask them their religion, their political affiliation, where they worked. I just said, can we give you a ride? Can we get you out of here? And they said, can we bring our dog? And we said, you can bring your dog. And we got him in the boat and we took him to safety. And I spent the whole day. I didn't even get out. The polls had closed by the time I got out of the rescue work. So the need is clear. The need is urgent. We are going to learn how to fill that need. We're going to learn how every single school and community and library in this country can create their own exhibition and museum of service. And we're going to learn some exciting things about how we can create a national signature building in an existing structure right here in DC near the National Mall. We are in some tremendously positive discussions with a signature building, not ready to announce it yet, but where we could invite all service organizations of all types, many of the ones I mentioned, Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, World Vision, Rotary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, having a place at long last where the millions of Americans who volunteer and visitors from around the country and around the world can see what is truly, truly who we are at our very best. And we are delighted both that you're here, but also that the people online are here. And I'm so thrilled and honored to introduce our next guest to tell you how to make all this happen. Akilah Watkins is a dynamic, vibrant service leader who's been doing this for, I can't believe it, but some 20 years, 25 years, I think. She is the head of a marvelous organization called Independent Sector. Many of you know of it well, a leader in bringing together the nonprofit sector, philanthropy, and foundations. And she started this work at the age of 14, turning an area into an abandoned area. It looked like it was going to be abandoned. And what do we do with this area in her neighborhood? Let's make it a community center so everybody can benefit. And she started that at 14. She's been continuing ever since. So from the bottom of my heart, let me thank each and every one of you here today. We have an amazing list of speakers, an amazing group of people to get to know yourselves. I'm seeing familiar and friendly faces around the room. Thank you for what you've done. And please welcome Dr. Akilah Watkins from Independent Sector.
Thank you very much, Brian, for your kind introduction. And thank you, Richard, so much for the use of today's, the Martin Luther King Library here in Washington, D.C. I'm very honored to be standing in front of you as President and CEO of Independent Sector. Let me just first start out by saying how amazing Brian and the entire museum team has been. We would not be here today if it wasn't for the fortitude and vision of Congressman Brian, which I know he doesn't want to be called Congressman anymore, but he will be. They have been working on this concept for more than 6 years. So just a little bit about how Independent Sector got connected with Brian. I started at Independent Sector almost 2 years ago. And when I walked in, we owned 66,000 square feet of space 2 blocks away from the White House. And we were, like many landowners in DC, trying to figure out, what do we do with this? And like most leaders, I decided to take a walk. And as I was walking around DC, I actually saw a lot of potential for our building. I actually ran across the Chinese American Museum that is around the corner from our building, and I said, wouldn't it be an amazing idea to transform our building that is literally 2 blocks from the White House into a national center where we can celebrate Americans who actually have volunteered and are engaged in a spirit of service, right? So how do you take a problem and transform it into a solution? And so with this idea, literally that week, I met Brian. I literally met Brian that same week. And as we met, we discussed my idea for our building, and we had one. And Brian let me know his idea that he's been working on for 6 years. And together, that partnership was born. And so I always like to tell that story because something that seemingly feels like a huge obstacle has transformed into what we see today. An invitation to be involved in one of the most exciting movements in this country. And it's about creating space to acknowledge service and to acknowledge Americans that dedicate a huge part of their lives or a small part of their lives to improving the quality of life for their community and their fellow residents. So before we get started, I want to recognize that there are some incredible acts of service happening in real time right now. Hurricane Helene has affected so many, and Milton is threatening as we speak. As a result, many from organizations represented in our audience and online today, as well as on our incredible speaking lineup, are stepping up at this time for the millions of Americans that have been impacted. I want to take a moment to recognize and thank so many who right now are supporting relief efforts. Thank you. I also want to just thank Brian again for the wonderful quote he shared, that everybody can be great because everyone can serve. And so that's exactly right. Service is something that makes our country strong. We are proud to partner with the National Museum and Center for Service to celebrate service in all its forms and to connect people to all the ways that everyone in every community can get involved. Like Brian mentioned, my life started with service. I grew up in a working class community outside of New York City. And at the age of 14, I found myself not having a summer job because I grew up at a time when a lot of these incredible services were being cut. And so I got together with a few of my friends that were in the same situation that I was in, wanting to do something for our community, wanting to stay active and busy, wanting to contribute, but didn't know exactly how to do that. And together, we created a youth organization. We actually took over an abandoned building, and we actually started running youth programs out of that building for our community. And we ran all types of youth programs, those dedicated to young women, those dedicated to young men. We ran programs that were focused on job training, entrepreneurship. We eventually went on to own that building as young people. And then we went on to transform that building into a community center in our local community. And we did that. We started with no money. We started with no grant. We started with no permission. We just got together as local citizens, young local citizens, and decided to make a change. And then all of the resources started to show up. And that experience has profoundly shaped how I approach my work. Service has the power to unite and affect change. And service still holds a special place in my heart, as I know it does in all of yours. I think volunteering is one of the most beautiful and authentic ways to show up for our fellow man and woman, whether in times of calm or crisis. Volunteers hold up the foundation of civil society. They strengthen democracy and help support the charitable sector. Volunteering is also a critical form of engagement with nonprofits that strengthens our nonprofit workforce and drives trust in our sector, especially in our polarized political environment that many of us find ourselves in. Brian talked a lot about service not being dependent on what your political affiliation is, and he's absolutely right. When Americans come together and they hammer nails into walls to build homes for Habitat for Humanity, it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. It's about neighbors coming together to build home for other neighbors. And that is what the power of volunteerism brings us. It brings us the ability to become in alignment with our fellow citizens. It melts away all the seemingly important divisions that we have. Every April, there is great anticipation about our release at Independent Sector of the estimated national value of each volunteer hour, because that's something we count every single year. And while we know that volunteers are a lot more than the actual hour that they contribute, this does give us one way to gauge the power and the national value of a single volunteer hour. And our most recent number is $33.49. So as we can see, volunteer hours actually have a lot of monetary value for organizations. And I encourage you all to go to our website, download our report, Value of Volunteer Time. We actually break this number out state by state also. As we look forward to celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence in 2026, we have a great opportunity to celebrate, inspire, uplift, and make service a part of our next 250 years. We're also delighted to spend time together today, sharing more about 250 and beyond, and all sorts of ways organizations can get involved in telling their stories of service. Now, let me tell you, we have a fantastic lineup today. We have a talented young leader from the National Youth Leadership Council, Caleb Sy, who will share more about how youth are getting involved in service. And I'm particularly excited about hearing you speak, Caleb. We have Michael Smith today, a good friend and colleague, CEO of AmeriCorps, and one of my favorite speakers ever, sharing more about stories about how everyone can be great and contribute. We have Rosie Rios, chair of the American 250, who will be sharing more about our big anniversary for our nation and how we can make 2026 a banner year for service. I'm also delighted to be joined by some amazing colleagues on a thought-provoking panel to share about the future of civil society. I am delighted to be alongside Jennifer Sarangelo with Points of Light, Carol Spahn, Director of the Peace Corps, and Kobe Langley with the American Red Cross. Finally, we'll have time to network here at the MLK Library today, so stick around for our reception after the program concludes. In addition, we have some amazing panels, and I encourage you all to please stay around and listen. Later today, we'll learn from on-the-ground partners who will be sharing their impact stories from developing inspiring exhibitions. Hopefully, these stories will continue to inspire you like they inspire me. For those joining online, thank you for tuning in. I invite everyone to connect on social media with the hashtag 250 and beyond, and make sure to connect with Independent Sector and the National Museum and Center for Service, both in person here at the library and online. Now, I want to welcome back Brian alongside our first panelist. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know we'll have an incredible conversation.